Thanks, y'all. Good evening. My name is Devin. I'm a recovered alcoholic, and happy to be with y'all. I do have a sobriety date, which is August 28th, 2011. I have a home group out here in Brooklyn. It's called No Serenity Till Brooklyn. We have 4 meetings a week. If you find yourself around Grand Army Plaza, getting anywhere near Barclays Center area, we're pretty close. And please look us up, and hopefully we can have you at our group. It is a great little group, and I'm really grateful. I've been there for about 8.5 years, and they've allowed me to do all kinds of service. And it's really been a useful thing for me to have a group and have an opportunity to do service and have a place I can be at a regular basis where people can actually lay eyes on me, And I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think it's really important that we understand that in AA, we just have members. And we get together and we get to do things like this, which is hopefully, share that we all might grow together and we get to walk this journey together. And that's what we do here. So, I kind of laugh because, when I got reached out to, it was like, you get to pick a topic. And I got to tell you guys, this is my least favorite thing in the world. I am not like I'm like, you give me a job and we are getting it done, but you tell me like, what do you want to do? It's like, I don't know. But I did pick what I think is one of the funniest lines in our literature, which is this line of, we alcoholics are undisciplined. It's like, yeah. But anyone else undisciplined? I am undisciplined. You might call it lazy, procrastinator, whatever. It's like, I'm not, discipline is not something that I ever thought I would want to strive to have in my life. It was not something I ever considered to be a useful quality. It just seemed like that was, if you're in trouble as a kid, you're getting disciplined. It seemed like it had this negative connotation. But then the next part of that sentence is, we let God discipline us in this simple way we've just outlined. And so I got to be a little careful. And I'm going to invite us to just take another deep breath, because I don't know about y'all, but every once in a while, when I get asked to speak, I get ideas about what I think I might be supposed to talk about. And that kind of worries me. And so let me just take a moment, and maybe we can all just take like a deep breath together, and we'll see where this actually goes. I think I see it. Okay. So first off, let me just tell you, I am a hopeless, one of those hopeless alcoholics. I don't know if any of you relate to being a hopeless alcoholic, what that looked like for me. Some of us are the has-beens. We get a bunch of stuff before alcoholism really takes hold, and then we throw it all away. I'm of the category of the never wases. I never was really able to put a life together that was worth living. If anything, I took a wonderful childhood and a wonderful family and all kinds of opportunity, and basically tried to throw all that stuff in the trash. I started drinking at 13, and my drinking, the first day I got drunk was the first time I realized how uncomfortable I was sober. It was really amazing. I had this experience of, I didn't realize that I was this uncomfortable, and I didn't have any crazy, horrific consequences. I mean, we got wasted, we had some laughs. I don't really remember what we did. I just know that for the first time in my life, I didn't really wonder if you liked me or what you thought about me. And I was able to do things like, throw some crap back at my friends when they were trying to make fun of me that I couldn't do when I was, prior to getting wasted. And I just started being able to engage in life in a different way. And it was fun, and I enjoyed it. And, those early, couple of formative years in the teens, I didn't have a ton of problems going on. But towards the end of that, later, like before, like the late high school years, I started to get some problems, and ultimately I ended up having some outside issue stuff, ended up in a treatment center. That was my introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous. It was through service. It was members of AA showing up to that facility, making it their business to take a meeting into this youth rehab facility in a hospital in northwest suburbs of Chicago and bring us a meeting. And I wish I could tell you that I got sober at 18. That's not really the story. I had about 90 days of forced abstinence. I left that place. The first night I had freedom. I took a drink, and basically for the next 6 years, I almost didn't draw a sober breath. And there's a whole lot of drama and stories, and we all have those stories. And what I can tell you is this: by the end of the road, I was waking up on a regular basis at 24 years old in Brooklyn, New York, with a suicide plan. because alcohol didn't give me the relief that it had when I was younger. And I was waking up and needing a drink, because if I didn't drink, I wasn't really going to be able to function in the world. And so it was really customary for me to get up and just start drinking first thing in the morning. And and there came a day where I wanted to get sober. And I knew that if this doesn't stop, I'm going to kill myself. And I actually looked up an AA meeting. You know, I had a guy that I met who was like a happy sober person. Maybe you've met some of those happy sober people, but this guy, Will from Hawaii, was the happy sober guy. And one time I had called him, and I don't know what I said to him. I was just talking about all the, you know, the drama of the week or whatever. And, you know, quietly on the other end of the phone, that man said to me, well, hey man, I go to AA and it works for me. You know, and so he didn't throw a big book at me. He didn't talk about God or prayer and meditation. There's 12 steps or meetings. He literally just said, this is what I do and it works for me. And he lived his life in front of me. And he lived love and service. And it was on display for me to see. It was an outward demonstration of what we do. It wasn't him talking about it. It was obvious, because Will loved everybody and everybody loved Will. And so I got that. I had that as, like, you know, a role model, if you will. And I think hopefully all of us get some kind of a role model, whether it's when we show up to AA and we meet some person that just is like sparkling, or before we get to AA, there's that person that shows up like a light and kind of allows us to maybe get to the place where we think maybe AA could be for me. So I actually came to AA on my own in June of 2011, and I got welcomed into the fellowship. New York's big fellowship city. You know, you come here, you want to, you know, you say you're new, you're going to get a bunch of phone numbers. You're going to get invited to meet me for coffee before tomorrow's meeting. This is where I'm going. You know, I had all that stuff going on. And the problem was I didn't really understand what I had. And people said, just don't drink and call me tomorrow. And I'd go home and drink. And I thought something was wrong with me. And for about 3 months, I ground myself down into dust. And I went to at least a meeting a day, almost every single day for that 3 months. And almost every single night I was in a blackout drinking myself until I was waking up with alcohol poisoning. And I didn't know what was going on. You know, I didn't understand. And I don't necessarily know if it was just I wasn't hearing people. It was probably because I just couldn't hear. You know, it's like one of those things where you're not awake until you wake up, right? So I don't know what people were saying, but what the message I was getting was just don't drink and go to meetings. And I can't do that. And that the date of my sobriety is not the day that I quit drinking. I still haven't quit drinking. Every time I tried to quit, I started again. But on that date, I walked into a meeting and I said, I'm effed and I don't know what to do. But I know if I'm not surrounded by you people or another one of these meetings, I will be drunk and high later. It's going to happen. It's been happening every single night. And we stood up and we grabbed hands and we closed the meeting with a serenity prayer. And I felt that little chill go down my spine. And the message I got with that little tingle going down my spine, praying to a God I have no concept of, never even thought of, no religious training as a kid, never thought prayer or meditation was anything I'd ever. Well, I did think meditation. I tried to do a Buddhist thing at one point in the middle of all that. Buddhism was going to save me, and that lasted all of, like, 3 minutes, and then I threw the plastic altar in the hallway, and and actually I want to talk about that, but I got that little chill down my spine. The message I got that day was, this is for you. This is for you. This thing right here called Alcoholics Anonymous. This is for you. And I can tell you that was really the day I joined Alcoholics Anonymous. That was the day I became a member. And that was the day where I had all the fight that I had to figure this out, or it was going to be my life and I know what I'm supposed to be doing. That kind of just moved over and shifted a 1 degree. And I was able to say, I'm willing to do whatever you people tell me to do. And I've been doing that ever since. And my whole life is because of Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, my career, my marriage, having an opportunity to be a member of my family, to be an uncle, all the things that I cherish in my life is because you guys gave me your time and you gave me your patience and your love and you handed me this program. And so I might cheat a little because I know this is an 11th step meeting, but I think the topic that I chose of we alcoholics are undisciplined, so we let God discipline us in this simple way, actually encompasses almost every aspect of what we're doing here. And so I came here and I'll just mention, when you get into our basic text and they bring up step 11 suggesting prayer and meditation. Now, I don't care what you call it, because I know there's apps on phones and people love the apps on the phone and they say, I'm doing my nightly 10th step. And technically what they're asking is how I see our book laying out my 11th step practice, or what would be an 11th step practice, which is in the evening, I might want to give myself some space to reflect on my day. So that would be part of this potential way of that God is inviting me to discipline myself is to, I see it, when we talk about one day at a time, early on it was like one day at a time, we just don't drink. But as I see it today, it's one day at a time. We try to practice living a spiritual life. And just like every week, I got to take the garbage out. Like as an alcoholic, I don't think I can really maybe wait a week. Like maybe I need to make this a daily practice of getting into my spirit and finding out if I've got some acid on my heart that's starting to erode this thing. If I'm going to wake up the next morning and maybe have a shot at going out and actually living the life of some spiritual principles, it usually helps if I'm not waking up carrying a whole bunch of stuff from yesterday, at least in my experience. And what I've found is I have had moments where, and I've had to call some old timers. And my buddy Gary in Indianapolis, I remember calling Gary once, and I was like, Gary, it's been a chunk of years. And I hear a lot of people that share, and they always seem to have inventory to write and amends to make. I said, I haven't really found myself in conflict with anybody for a while. It's a really rare occurrence when I find myself in like a conflicted conversation or some kind of, you know, agitation with another person. And I said, am I doing something wrong? And he goes, well, and at that point he had 55 years sober maybe. And he goes, look, my experience is you're going to have all kinds of time where life, you're just in the groove of life. So you got to live life. He goes, and at some point that's going to change and you're going to be back there with your feet to the fire. And we have these tools. And the main thing is that we don't let those tools develop a bunch of rust in those periods where life is going good. And I think that's one of the things we hear about in like the page before when we're kind of in this 10 and 11. I kind of feel like it's a stew. Like these two steps are kind of so commingled. Like one of them is kind of like, I got a morning practice that suggests that I got an evening review, but the 11th step also talks about through the day practices. And ultimately, that's kind of what our 10th step suggests is as I live in the world, I'm kind of using self-examination to check myself periodically and make sure that I'm not just waking up in the morning and inviting God into my life and then leaving God at my kitchen table while I go into the world to live my life. And I'll let you know about it later when I do this evening review. So I do this, and I'll just bear in mind, I'm one of those I was an 8-year-old kid that got evaluated. I don't know if anybody else had to get evaluated by like, the family's called in, like there might be something wrong with him. And they gave me this ADHD thing, which I see as a superpower. But what I'll say is that sometimes I throw threads on the table and I don't always get to close those threads. So I apologize. So just bear with me. Um, I don't care what we call it, but to me, it's like if one day at a time I'm practicing living a spiritual life, I think that's the goal. And my sponsor, Bart, has been really helpful about that because he pointed out the word in the 12th step is we try to practice these principles in all our affairs. He goes, and I play music for a living, and we've had discussions about, whether it's the gym analogy and weight training, or it's learning an instrument or any kind of skill that we do, because there's all kinds of skills and trades that we learn over the years. And I don't know about you, but when I start getting an interest in something, I'm usually pretty bad at it. I'm not an expert. I sucked at playing my instrument for a bunch of years in the sense where no one was going to offer me money or, to get on a stage and do that with them. But I continued to practice and I continued to be disciplined enough to put that time aside to say, I want to develop this and I want to see where this goes. And 20 some years later, 25 years later, it's a career. It's a big part of how I live my life, but that's been 25 years of dedication towards this thing. And I think that's really what we're asked to do when we get to the 11th step. And I also believe this is an individual journey. The key word for me is I seek. And so I need to seek. I need to sought through prayer and meditation is in action. And they go on to say, look, there's all kinds of stuff to seek. So don't limit yourself. You get an idea to go on some kind of silent retreat and you go, well, that sounds crazy. Well, maybe follow that. They offer us that if we're actually using prayer and meditation, and the other word that I love in the 11th step is conscious. It's not unconscious contact with God. I think that day when I described getting struck sober, that was kind of like unconscious contact with God. I didn't realize I was, surrendering. I had no idea what's going on. And it was just kind of like I got poked in my heart by the Spirit being like, hey, you're in the right place. You're here. I'm with you. And so perhaps I've had unconscious contact with God my whole life. if I pull that back and I really get on board that like perhaps God has been here all along. Our third step promise, when we go through that whole thing and we start getting into this idea, I'm going to make a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. My favorite promise in there is when we become conscious of his presence. It means I wake up to the reality that God's been here all along. And so in the 11th step, when I'm supposed to seek conscious contact, to me, that's I got to make a conscious effort. Like I need to actually take time out of my life and consciously seek this relationship. I'm married now, a little over 4 years. We've been together almost 10. It's almost 10 years from our first date. I sought this lady out and invited her out to lunch one day. That was a conscious choice. I said, I'd like to get to know this lady, maybe see if there's something there. I, reached out to her. Hey, would you want to do this? Then I continued to seek that relationship by spending time with her, by reaching out to her, by suggesting different things we could do to get to know each other. And so that is an element of seeking. Sandy Beach had a great thing about hide and seek and the different variations of seeking, but I don't know if you ever find that one. It's awesome. But I relate to that, and I see that in a lot of things. And I think that's what we're asked to do here is go out and see how deep the well is. Don't limit yourself. And so they give us these clear things. They say, look, in the morning, in the evening, and all through the day. So, always. I honestly think that what we really get here around step 11 is actually before they introduce it on page 85. And it's probably my favorite sentence in the whole book. And I think really it's like the entirety of our program. It's really simple. It says, every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. I think that's really the essence of this whole program. But I've looked for wiggle room, like every day. Does that include bank holidays and like my birthday is my birthday part of every day? Don't I get one day? I guess every day is every day. And must carry isn't like a suggestion. That's like I have to do this. A must is a have to. So I must carry the vision of God's will into not some but all of my activities. And I've looked at that word all a bunch, and I can't really get any wiggle room out of all. All sounds like all. And so I think that this whole thing of seeking a deeper relationship with God through prayer and meditation is hopefully leading me to be able to possibly every so often live up to that perfect ideal in that sense. And I understand that I'm going to fall short, which I think is the beauty of why they suggest in the evening we should maybe take a look at how we were living. Now, retire at night, I think, is subjective. Some people retire at night when they're driving home from work and they walk in the door and they're going to be with their family for the rest of the night. Some people, they think it's when you lay down for bed. I don't really have an opinion on that. I think, again, if we're taking a moment to continue to use self-examination, prayer, and meditation as a way of living, I think we're moving forward. And I think the attitude that we're asked to keep here is an attitude of spiritual growth. I have alcoholism. I am of the opinion that our literature is the best description of alcoholism I've ever found, and is the one that's most true with my experience. And what they say about alcoholism is that we're in the grips of a progressive illness, which over any considerable period of time only gets worse, never better. And when somebody suggested to me that my alcoholism was progressing, whether I was drinking or not, that kind of scared me. And I feel like it's kind of like dementia or Parkinson's. It's one of these conditions that no matter what is going on, it is continuing to progress. And so the reason that I need to seek in prayer and meditation a deeper relationship with God is that as I'm going along, I need to make sure that my spiritual condition is open and growing. I hope that a week from now, I'm not the same person I am today. Definitely not a year from now. Because if I am, then I'm moving closer to a drink. It's kind of is how I see this stuff. And so these disciplines are pretty simple, but they say this: there are many helpful books also. And this is something that I love, but I think got missed in a while. I know there's some people that I've met that kind of feel like the only book you ever need is a big book. And somebody lovingly pointed out to me, the guys that wrote the big book didn't have a big book to read. That, there was no big book until these people sat down and tried to distill the experience they were already having. So clearly the big book wasn't the vessel for them to find God. But those people that had found God through living the spiritual way of life sat down to codify what had happened to them so that we could benefit from it. And so I But I love that they put in here like, hey, one of these tools of seeking might be to reach out to some other outside literature. And some of the things I found around this, I think, have opened me up in a completely different way to spirituality, to the relationship I could have with God, and ultimately have changed my perception of prayer. And I think that's one of the things I wanted to talk about tonight. Before I jump into that, let me just see if I'm getting off the track here. Well, let me tell you a little bit about my personal experience with this before we jump into that. I have gone through periods of time where at night I sat down quietly and I meditated, and I considered each one of these questions prayerfully and like contemplatively, contemplatively, and that was wonderful. And then I heard some people suggest that they sat down and wrote this stuff, and they got an immense benefit from sitting down and writing this stuff. So there was a period of time where I sat down and I wrote the answers to these questions. And after maybe a year and a half of that, what it started to feel like was it was just a thing that I was checking off to do every day. And it kind of felt like the actual spirit had left. It was just an exercise that I was doing. And one of the things I noticed was I was writing the same stuff almost every night. And I started to wonder what was going on. And that's why I think these kind of steps are a little bit commingled with 10 and 11. And sorry if I'm kind of jumping around to something that's off topic, but if every night you're writing, this is what I think I could have done better, and here's where I see I was selfish and fearful and dishonest, and no, I wasn't kind and loving toward all, which I think that one's kind of a bait question. I think that one is almost impossible. If you include your thoughts, that one's impossible. I mean, but there's always things I thought I could have done better, and a lot of times what I would write down is I felt like I could have lived in the presence of God better that day. And I could, there was hours of my day where I realized that I was just living and not really conscious and not having any of that reflection or any of that turn back to my higher power. Just, be 6 hours at work or something. And I just realized this long chunk had happened. And I was getting a little, my mind was racing a little bit. And I noticed I was getting agitated. These things were cropping up. And so I realized I didn't really have a through the day practice. And so one of the things I tried to do was, is it possible? So I living in Brooklyn and living in New York, we have this amazing thing where, I use the subway a lot. And I realized that in any given course of my day, I had a lot of scene changes. Meaning, like, if I wake up and I'm praying and I've got the coffee and I'm sitting at my kitchen table, there's a moment where I'm walking on the sidewalk and now I'm a pedestrian walking to the train. And then when I get to the subway, I'm now standing on the platform, and now I'm in the train car, and now I'm back on the subway, and now I'm in the rehearsal studio, or I'm at the gig or wherever, so there was all these different moments where I was like a little bit of activity and I was somewhere else, and a little bit of activity and somewhere else. And there's a lot of people in New York. So there's a lot of interaction that you have the opportunity to possibly get a resentment, get a little bit of selfishness going on, all that kind of stuff. And so the practice that I tried to put myself to for a little bit was, is it possible that every time I go into one of these different scenes, that I try to ask God to direct me in this way, that I could be the pedestrian that I'm supposed to be, standing on the subway platform as God would have me be, riding the subway, and the passenger that I need to be if I'm driving the car. Let me, and I started just trying to see, can I actually get to this thing where I have prayer going on all through the day? And my buddy Jeffrey said, everything we do can be considered a prayer. It's just about how we approach it. And to that end, there's a great book called Practicing the Presence of God by a guy named Brother Lawrence. And I think it was like the 1500s. He was a lay brother in a monastery. And he had I think his leg was, he maybe had a bum leg. So he couldn't become a monk for whatever reason, because he had a physical deformity. It disqualified him from actually becoming a monk. So he was just a lay brother at the abbey his whole life. And he would wash the dishes or help fix people's shoes and do some of the menial tasks around there. But over the course of his life, he developed this practice of trying to live in the presence of God and turn every action of his life into a prayer. And what he started having was exuding this level of being that attracted priests and nuns and all sorts of people way high up in the church to reach out to him and ask his advice. These were supposedly the spiritual leaders, and they were writing him letters going, I've got this problem. What do you think? And his answer was the same. I believe if you turn every action of your life into a prayer of God, and you either ask for his forgiveness, or you pray gratitude for being able to do the job you've gone, you'll know God better. And these, problems that you think you have will basically melt away. And so I felt like I read that book, and then I was seeing that I was struggling living in the world, or I was feeling like I was struggling living in the world, and feeling like I had some deficiencies in my ability to practice, and today I'll tell you, like, this isn't a account of now I'm absolved of all the defects of character. I mean, I'm living in the world, and I get frustrated and angry and resentful and prideful and self-seeking, all that stuff. The volume's gotten turned way down. And a lot of times my mind will yell some crazy stuff, and I notice my mouth didn't open. Which to me is like, oh, that was pretty cool. I didn't actually say the thing that I thought that sounded almost as loud in my head as my voice. So there's progress going on. But so I tried that for a while. And then there was a moment where I found that the evening was a little tough, and I'm playing a lot of gigs late at night, and I'm coming home exhausted. And I started a practice of waking up in the morning and reflecting on my day and my night in the morning. And our book suggests that we would ask God for corrective measures. And so in the beginning of the day, I would consider the day before. And if there was some stuff that I could feel was hanging there, I would find out, do I owe an apology? Is there a conversation I needed to have? Is there anything I could possibly do about any of the resentment that I have? Do I need to write some inventory? Do I need to forgive somebody? Like, where am I at with this stuff? And so do I have some corrective measures that maybe I could take today? And then I would actually sit and list the spiritual principles with which I was hoping to bring to the world. And I would just take a moment and write what I would call my ideal for the day, of how I'd like to try, if I was able to be able to live from this place. And this is the kind of, man that I'd like to be in the world. And then I would go into meditation with that. And then there'd be some prayer. And then at one point I started writing a prayer at the end of that. I would do all this stuff. I would get quietly, and then I would write a prayer, and I would pray this prayer. And that was my prayer for the day. And so I filled up notebooks of writing stuff down. I've done the formal answer the questions. I've done the meditate in the evening. And what I've found is, after a while of practicing these things, at some point, what was really hitting really hitting the nail on the head will start to feel like the soul's gone. And so I'm a big fan of, like, if you start feeling like this is a hollow and empty thing, following the disciplines that God has outlined, I don't think is supposed to be a mechanical thing. This isn't an exercise in mechanics here. This is an exercise in getting closer to God. And so if I'm feeling hollow and empty, just checking off the boxes, saying I'm doing everything our literature says, I mean, maybe this is heresy, but I say, find out what works for you. They say, we think we could be vague. We could be vague about prayer and meditation, but we do have some definite and valuable suggestions. This is maybe what would work for you. But we also, in the 11th step, it talks about this is us embarking on this individual journey. That this is me finding a real connection with my God. And you've got to be able to experience your God, and how you experience your God might look a little different than how I experience my God. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think if at the end of the day, the focus and the discipline that I'm really looking at today is, what is my attitude in trying to apply these actions to my life? What is the attitude that I have in prayer? And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the prayers that were offered in our literature. And to me, what I think when I think about this idea of discipline and my seeking of God, it really is talking about, God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. We have this third step prayer. It's beautiful. In our book, they talk about, first of all, we had to quit playing God. It doesn't work for us. And then they tell us that when we sincerely take such a position, all sorts of remarkable things follow. And it was, to me, what I found was the position that I'm sincerely asked to take for me to really have, discipline in that. So the position I'm asked to take is that God is God and I'm the drunk. If I'm really got a first step here, and I understand I'm powerless and my life is really unmanageable, well, why am I trying to manage all these things in my life? So do I have the discipline to get quiet and pray from this aspect that I'm powerless, my life is unmanageable, and I'm going to allow you to take the reins here. And if I'm lucky and you actually remove this bondage of self and take away these difficulties, I will go out and try to be a demonstration of what you can do through your power, your love, and your way of life. And I think that's what this whole deal is about. When Bill sits down with Bob, the real message was Bill is sober and drank like Bob. That's the message. The real deal of AA is one drunk talking to another. And that's what we had when Bill and Dr. Bob sat down with Bill Dotson. He looked at these two guys. Dr. Bob's like 2 weeks sober or something. If we follow the dates in the big book, Dr. Bob was 16 days sober, because it says on June 26th, these two men came to my bed. And we attributed Dr. Bob's sober date for the longest time as June 10th. I guess there's history books that say otherwise now, but we'll go with June 10th, June 26th, 2 weeks of sobriety. And this guy's sitting in the bed going, you guys are somebody. And the message there was, no, God has showed up, and God's power, God's love, and God's way of life is allowing us to be here as a demonstration that this is possible for you. And so to me, there's a discipline in this idea of prayer. I got to remember when I'm going to pray that God is God and I'm the drunk. I'm not the power, but I need to tap into that power. We get, my Creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. We have more surrender. I don't get to hold on to anything in my life. I have to let go of everything that I think is bad and good. I don't like letting go of the things that I think are good. I mean, have you ever done that? I mean, I've been doing this for a couple of years. It's not really an upper of a prayer, but take an inventory of what you think is good in your life. And then see how it might feel tomorrow morning to sit and say, well, God, if it's the music, I decided I wanted to play music as like a little kid at 10 years old. And I never stopped. And I'm an alcoholic, and I believe I was born with that. And if I'm an example of self-will run riot, is it possible that this music aspiration was me with self-will run riot? If this isn't what you need me to be doing, and this is standing in the way of where I am today and where you need me to go so I can serve you effectively, to take it. And when COVID happened and music died, I got to tell you, I had to write a lot of inventory. I was not a happy camper. I was like, all right, God, I was willing to pray that, but I didn't mean this, but what if I'm in the wrong marriage? God, I really like this lady. I'm really loving this. Before we got married, I'm really liking this lady. I love that we're together and living together. Seems like it's a good relationship. If this isn't the one that I'm supposed to be in, thank you for allowing me to see that this is possible, and take it if you need it. And the amazing thing about that, again, is that's an attitude. The attitude for me that I've had to get disciplined into is the attitude of surrender, and the attitude that God is God and I'm the drunk. And I'm not the one who gets to decide what God's going to do here. My job is to raise my hand and be like, hey, man, I'm here and I'm willing to serve. Signing up for duty today. What do you got for me? I want to read some stuff from one of those outside books, and I hope that's okay. And this is one of my favorites that I've read recently. It's a book called When Man Listens by a guy named Cecil Rose. So it's early Oxford group literature. This was written in 1936. So for anyone who's maybe not familiar with the Oxford group, that's, some AA history stuff. That's like where Bill Wilson kind of washed up into from a guy named Roland Hazard and some other cast of characters, Ebby Thatcher, Roland Hazard, Shep Cornell, Seaber Graves was like the New York crew. And this Oxford group deal was, a group of people that were already living very strict religious lives and wanted to get as close to like first century Christianity before there was an institution. They had a belief that the institution was straying a little bit from the message that I think was first carried. And so these were deeply spiritual people and deeply religious people that wanted to live deeper spiritual lives. And what ended up happening was some drunks found themselves there, started trying to get involved in that level of discussion and fellowship. And as a result, they got sober. And so a lot of what we do in AA came from the Oxford group. And so there's some amazing literature that came from some of those members. And what you'll hear a lot of times is what I hear is a lot of our literature in this. But I love this. So I'm just going to read it. And please, I hope this is okay. Humor me. He goes, God has a plan and God speaks. But if he is to be heard and his plan is to be known and carried out, man must listen. And so I think when we're talking about prayer and meditation, a lot of times you hear that, prayer is talking to God and meditation is listening to God. And this guy kind of draws the attitude that even prayer would be listening for God. I think that's my 5 minutes. Thank you so much. He goes, this means a new attitude to God, or a new approach to God for many of us. Now let's see who identifies with this, because I really identify with this. He goes, our attitude when we have prayed has been, listen, Lord, for thy servant speaketh. Our prayer has been what Canon Streeter classifies as pagan prayer, the attempt to bend God to our desires and make him the servant of our needs. We have made our plans and decisions first and then sought God's blessing and assistance. Prayer, when it consists of this one-sided address by us to God, becomes increasingly unreal and is eventually dropped and only formally retained. To me, that's kind of that idea. You ever get to that place where it kind of feels like I'm doing this stuff, but the Spirit's gone? That's what I think eventually dropping prayer, or formally retaining prayer, would look like. All right, I'm doing it because I said I got to do it, but am I really here? And so he offers that prayer can really begin when the desire to know God's will for us. It begins with the desire to know God's will for us and to be brought under his control. The promise that our petitions will be answered is only to those who have first placed themselves in line with his will. If God is to become for us the living, active God at work directing our life and the world's, it is vital that we should learn how to listen. There is one condition to be fulfilled before we begin. We must be willing to hear anything God says to us. It is useless to seek his guidance in one area of life when we are not prepared for him to talk to us about a certain other area with which he may need to deal first. If we want guidance about our family, we may have to listen to some things God has to tell us about ourselves, our character, and habits. If it is personal problems, worry, or health for which we need direction, we may have to face what God has to say about the way we run our business or our attitude to money. It is all or nothing. Before you begin to listen to God, you must get rid of any known reservations. Now, for me, I listen to that and I get chills, because I see my lifelong protestations against what I think spirituality, and a lot of the lifelong prejudices I may have had about what spirituality, prayer, meditation are kind of getting stepped on a little bit. And I think this is, as I go through our literature and I try to consider the totality of what am I being asked to do here? I'm undisciplined. So what is this discipline that I'm being asked to do? And what I get is, there's some clear directions. Am I willing to take space in the morning? Am I willing to take space and reflect through the day? Am I willing to try, just like I sought a relationship with my wife or with my instrument or with other friends? Am I willing to actually place the necessity to build a relationship with my God? This is life and death for me. And then as I got deeper into it, it was, am I starting to understand that my prayer life and my spiritual life here has to be how I live, and that I don't get to hold on to any of this stuff. If I really want to go the distance, it means I need to be spiritually perfect, which is impossible. But what I see is, this is I've got something to aim for here. And that's what Bill was talking to us about in the 6th step. He goes, we need to raise our eyes toward perfection. And I think the 11th step for me, and this idea that every day I need to seek a deeper relationship with God, and perhaps, I've tried just this one too. You ever tried just praying only for the knowledge of God's will and the power to carry that out? Not any of the other prayers, just God, please allow me to see your will and give me the power to carry it out. And only saying that. That's kind of fun, because then I get all the other stuff out of here. It takes away the idea that my prayer might be a petition to bend God into doing what I want to do. And I've heard people with that, long-term sobriety, I believe that God is going to give me all the things that I want in this world. And I go, watch out, because that's not what I don't see that to be the goal here. To me, the goal is, if I'm lucky, I will know a sense of purpose. And if I'm lucky, I will be able to live a way of life that makes sense to me. And that might not make sense to all of y'all, but it's going to make sense to me. And that degree of usefulness is given me a level of stability in my heart that has allowed me to then be able to live in the world as an imperfect human being. And to me, that's the greatest gift that all of this is about. If I'm really got a relationship with God going on and I feel that power, then my life, even though it's really chaotic as far as the logistics and the scheduling of it, it just happens. It just works out. And I don't understand that. And I don't understand how one day I was just unable to not drink and the next day I got struck sober. So from that experience, I go, that's my buy-in right there. If there's justice in this world, I'm dead or locked up in jail or I'm still drunk. But somehow, some way, this loving God showed up and touched my heart and said, I want to get to know you. And I think that's what we're asked to do through this whole process, is to slowly, if we can, get back to that idea that, like, I'm not the power, but I'm here to be the vessel. And I think that's what we can really get to, if we keep doing this. So I don't know if any of this makes sense. As I said, the ADHD thing, the threads go on the table. I don't know how much that's undone, um, but I had a lot of fun, and I'm really excited that you guys allowed me to be here. And I thank you for your attention and for letting me kind of just go on a journey and read some stuff that has really helped me. So thank